Welcome back, everyone, to the Disaster Tough podcast, where we share insights into the big plays and right calls of leadership. We dive deep into the stories, lessons learned, and ideas that will help you in the field. Let's go. Welcome back to the Disaster Tough podcast. It's your host, John Scardena. I'm so excited for this episode. Every single week, we try to find really cool people with different perspectives and understanding. And apparently, I'm like on a Colorado kick. I think about a year ago, I had two PIOs out there. Amin, my producer, he's from Colorado. I had Mike Willis. Shout out to him. I think he just retired as the director of the state. And now I get to interview Anisha. Before she comes on, before she can react to this, I have a very special experience with Anisha because we met at a conference in November of 2022. And that was just when the show was really exploding. We went from 4,000 or 5,000 people, and all of a sudden we were like 30,000 all of a sudden. And that was right around that time. And I didn't know what to expect. And then when I went up to the conference, Anisha had seen a post. She found me. I gave her a challenge coin. And it was a great moment for two reasons. One, I felt like, hey, there's a lot of value of the guests who come on here and what we're doing. And it made me feel like, okay, let's keep going on this thing. But the second thing it did is she didn't know this, but I was actually standing there with all my old FEMA buddies who had worked with me. And they were all making fun of me for podcasting. And all of a sudden this person comes up for me, asked for a challenge coin, and made me I had the biggest head in the world that bothered all of them. I thought it was fantastic. But either way, Anisha is such a wonderful asset. Anisha Borthakur, she is with Denver OEM. She's going to be talking about kind of her experiences, what she brings to the table. I just think she's off the charts intelligent, so I wanted her to come out on the show. But with that, Anisha, welcome to Disaster Tough Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. This is a long time coming from 2022, and I just walked up and was like, "You're my favorite emergency management podcast host."
Let's go!
Let's go. Yeah, no, it was for sure. I was nerding out real hard.
Well, I appreciate the nerding out. We put a lot of effort into providing advice. Now, I don't have a monopoly on all things, but it's cool to see different perspectives, literally globally now, where we've had people come in and to hear that there's value out there. I appreciate that all the way. So don't take that compliment lightheartedly, even though my head is about this big right now. So, awesome.
No, absolutely. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
So let's talk about you. It's what is that? That Toby Keith song? You want to talk about you? You want to talk about me? You want to talk about? So you're doing lots of cool things in addition to flag football, which you told me about earlier, which is just baller, by the way. Your job. You're in ops, right?
Yes.
So Denver's unique for a lot of different reasons, but your ops perspective, what do you bring to the table? And what are some of the things that you're focusing on?
Sure. Yeah. Well, my background is in public health, specifically health law and human rights. That's what I got my master's in. But prior to coming to Denver, public health preparedness, did a lot of field work, especially during COVID. And then came to Denver with a little bit of that public health operations background. And now I'm fully immersed. All hazards. I maintain and manage our emergency operations centers, our emergency supply warehouse. I do some emergency contracting, and some support for our duty officer program.
Good gosh. Anything else?
What else do I do? I know it's the very cool thing about Denver OEM is that for a large city, our office is kind of small, especially with the amount of emergency management specialists that we have on the team. So we do get a breadth of responsibility, and we do get to work with our fellow emergency management specialists a lot. So I do help out with planning. I help out with training and exercise because we train and exercise to our EOCs. So there's a lot of overlap there. I work with our continuity specialist because continuity is back up to me. I'll back him up. It's just a great experience on the whole.
The L3 Harris Extreme 400P radio solves problems and is specifically designed for emergency services. How do we know? We field tested it with medical, urban search and rescue, and collapse and confined structures. This radio is amazingly tough. Check out the L3 Harris Extreme 400p radio at l3harris.com right now. How do you spell Doberman Emergency Management? EOP, OEP, HVA, HMP, Thyra, TTX, Drone, PDA. Whenever you need an expert, Doberman Emergency Management field experts are there for support. Contact an expert at DobermanEMG.com today. First responders, this is for you. From law enforcement to emergency managers, it's time for emergency services professionals to overcome communications issues. The Readiness Lab, in partnership with L3 Harris Technologies, is pleased to announce a free next-level emergency services training and exercise workshop. In the morning, we'll hear from 4 field experts: Pete Gaynor, former acting secretary of the U.S. Department of Homeland Security; Jake Shores, quality control expert, GMR, reviewing mass casualty incidents; Anthony Escoto, communications expert, enhancing multi-agency communications during complex coordinated response operations; Barry Moss, public safety expert, the London Olympic success, afternoon interactive exercise, mass casualty response at the parade, stressing communications, gear provided by L3 Harris; and finish strong with our first responder networking event. This is a community experience. Registration is free and open to all emergency services professionals. Sign up now for the July 23rd workshop in Vancouver, Washington. We'll see you there.
CBRNE Convergence, the world's largest conference for the non-conventional threat, is heading back to Orlando between October 28th and 30th, 2024. With 3 days of workshops, lectures, and interactive sessions delivered by speakers from around the world on the latest issues and approaches to CBRNE and hazmat. Make sure to claim your early bird discount by registering now at cbrneworld.com/event/Orlando.
Okay, can I just stop you right there, because I absolutely love hearing you say that. The amount, so per the nature of what we do, there's a lot of public speaking events and a lot of Q&As that we do with people in person, and I hear over and over and over again, and I understand it, and for everybody's listening in, I don't want to belittle those people. They'll say things like, because we have a small staff, I am X, and it's always negative. This problem or that problem. But you have just a positive and wonderful outlook on that. I've also been a person who just likes jumping between different tasks and be able to help out where I can. And sometimes a smaller staff allows people to be, a jack of all trades, master of none, but better than a master of one, right? And get out there and lots of people. So positive outlook, 100%. I think it's a great idea. Seriously.
Yeah, no, it allows for a lot of, luckily our supervisors, they do kind of encourage a lot of that innovation, working with each other, gives us some, creative space to work in. And so currently, my big year-long project at this point has been an emergency operations center guidebook, and then section operating guides for all of our staff. So position checklists, available applications, how do they fit into our emergency operations plan? How are their agencies represented in our EOC? And how do they take their day job, make it scary, put it on steroids, and function in our, what they affectionately call it in our city, the bunker.
Oh my gosh, can I hire you? Can we get you out of Denver OEM right now? Because that's amazing. Seriously, that stuff is cool. That's cool to be able to put the puzzle pieces together. For those who are maybe going through that same process right now in a bigger or smaller EOC otherwise, I was literally just on the East Coast helping out somebody else trying to do that for their EOC, interestingly enough.
Okay.
For your perspective, what are some of the things that you've been learning in this year-long process of doing that?
Definitely, I think part of the things that I'm really picking up on is my intention with some of this stuff is to kind of create that crosswalk. Because what we've seen in people who are new to the Emergency Operations Center, say they sit in logistics or something, they seem almost afraid or timid to go get up out of their seat, go just ask the question to operations, being you asked for this truck, do you need a driver? Very simple things like that. And I'm trying to kind of put that into writing and promote it by saying hey, log support too. If you get in a resource request, right, these are the 3 people that you have to go check in with. Go check in with the ops section chief. Go check in with the requester, right? Trying to create and promote that interoperability. And I think the biggest thing is trying to provide them the space to exercise that agency. Because we want those, right? I feel you've talked about this on the podcast, right? Even if you're not an emergency manager, but you're in the EOC, you still have to have that proactive nature, that drive to just be like, I'm not going to wait for my section chief to tell me what to do. I'm going to be the self-starter, go get my questions answered so we can speed it up and meet the pace of the emergency that we're responding to. So trying to put that into words, into like a 30-page guidebook or whatever, that has been a journey.
Yeah, empowering people without overwhelming them and or giving them too much authority where they don't think that they lose that ICS or that NIMS perspective is balanced. Fine. Yeah. People that we've hired in the past, and we're pretty good at it now about who we hire, but I would say the people who don't understand urgency or appreciate urgency or are self-starters, I just don't think they're one of us. Like emergency managers and or small business world, I think there's a lot of overlap there, to be honest. And one of them is a self-starter who wants to solve problems, won't wait. So how do you find the balance between giving even yourself, being a self-starter and making sure that you are coordinating well with the team, or at least not being abrasive to that team?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, and I kind of called it that bunker earlier, the way we staff our EOC here in Denver is that we get agency representatives, whether it's like deputy directors, decision makers in those agencies that can come in, obviously utilize city resources to help respond in a citywide way. And being able to kind of like pick up like the soft skills on like people management, right? And helping them out. You got to be able to pick up and being like, okay, this person, I can tell, likes that little coaching mentality, likes to be pushed a little bit. This other person seems to be a little bit out of their element. They don't really like it here. Let's see why. Like, let's slow it down for them, break it down for them versus the other person who I've had a few people come up to the EOC and say like, hey, I never thought I would be in this position, but I love it. Like, give me more stuff to do. And I'm like, yes, that's exactly what I want to hear. And on the opposite end, some people have come up to me and been like, I don't do this, right? Like, this is not my job. I work in like aging, like I work in aging policy or with the ADA and advising people on that. Why am I down here? And then being able to kind of break it down and say like, hey, look, you're down here for a reason. You're here because it's important that we have your point of view. It's going to be weird and it's going to be fast and it's going to be scary, but it's okay. We're in this together. Kind of, right. Just pinpointing where those things have to come into play.
Yeah, I think that's a great leadership skill to figure out like what motivates people where they're at and things. Not everybody's motivated by the same thing for sure. And people run at different paces. I personally love people who can't stop running as fast as they can. But sometimes when people hear that, they think, oh, if I become more passionate, more serious, more driven, and that's not the same thing. Those people actually sometimes are very abrasive to other people and they can't get the job done. Running fast includes the ability to run along with other people and or at a pace that is sustainable. And instead of big blast, if he just a long burn. So
100% fully agree.
Let me talk about Denver real quick because I'm hyper curious about Denver. What are the things that you're most activated for? And because I apologize for not understanding the geography of the or at least region, were you activated for that Red Rock concert problem or like the
hailstorm?
Storm, yeah. How
close? So we're about like a half hour-ish away from Morrison is the town that Red Rocks is in. But Red Rocks is maintained and managed by Denver Arts and Venues because it is a City and County of Denver property. And so they're in Jefferson County. They have to work with Jeffco and like their 911 dispatch fire teams. But then it's also us in our Parks and Rec department who's kind of responsible for the space.
Got it.
We weren't activated for it. Hail is something that's really weird in Colorado. I'm not from Colorado originally, but over the last 3 years, it's become a pretty big deal. Yeah. We didn't activate for it. I don't remember if I was duty officer that week or not, but I heard about it for sure. And then we did do some after action stuff with Arts and Venues to kind of figure out what went wrong, what went right, get that, that feeling on the ground.
From a strategic level, that could apply to any venue, anywhere. Because, me being a dynamic populations guy, one of our scenarios is stadiums, obviously. Mm-hmm. Something that could apply to me in my training or otherwise, not trying to hyper focus on them, but some of the bigger, strategic lessons learned. What are some of the lessons learned from that one that other people could learn from?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of it is, and I think we've kind of talked about this too. But it's like, for lack of a better term, you're almost like damned if you do, damned if you don't. If you make too big of a noise on alert and warning, people are going to be pissed because they spent hundreds of dollars on these concert tickets and you're delaying the show. But then if you don't warn enough, people come back and they're like, I broke my hand, I broke this, I broke that. Why did you guys warn us? Because we didn't have visibility at the time of it. When we did the after action with the folks over there, we kind of asked, like, what were the steps that you guys followed? Was there anything missing? And it kind of turns out that by the book, they did things, right? Like, they went on the PA system. They told people to seek shelter. These hailstorms come in within a matter of like almost seconds. And you can't predict how big these hail objects are. And then whenever we saw it and we got the news, like baseball-sized hail, which is nuts to me.
Yeah.
That's
Colorado. Which state did you move from?
Before I came to Denver, I was in Philadelphia, but I'm not originally from Pennsylvania. I've bounced around a lot in my time.
Now I'm hyper curious. This is like super big tangent. Where'd you grow up?
Houston.
We're going to talk about this after the show. I also bounced around. Yeah, like the hailstorm is interesting to me because, looking at it from other perspectives, National Weather Service, like all day, was like, this is going to be a big problem. And you have an outdoor venue and lots of things. And I don't want to harp on them. That's not the purpose of this podcast. I might do it when I'm by myself. But, from the lessons learned perspectives, venues have a requirement to make money. They have to sustain. They get concerts out there. They don't want to cancel those concerts. I get all of that.
And it's a private sector event management behind it too, right? That they have to
Yes,
work with.
You're not talking about the public safety side. I'm just talking about like the events management perspective, like the company. I think there was a lot of lessons learned from them. And I go back to like almost like an insurance perspective. Like, do you want to be on the news for gross negligence? Do you want to be on the news for a pregnant lady? Like that pregnant lady couldn't get back in because the security guard said no. Like, you don't want to have those stories, and there's lessons learned from that, sure. But I'm going to toot my own horn for a second. That's why we have the dynamic populations class that covers security, evacuations, mass care, public relations, medical transport and triage, and CBRN. Like, emergency management can be involved in so many more mission sets than it is now. And it does take a great deal of finessing to make sure that you're a help and not a distraction to those people who are doing those missions. So I don't know. I go through all of that and wonder, how we can take our field to the next level, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you're obviously trying to do good stuff, but on that whole tangent aside, going back to Denver, what are you most activated for? Is it wildfires? Is it just weather events? Like, what's the...
Yeah, so we don't, unfortunately, in the last few years, we have been activated a ton. I remember my director pointed out to us, he did some math. Prior to 2020, we had averaged 4 days of activation per year, winter storm, special events. 2020 into 2020, at the end of 2023, we were averaging almost 100 plus days of activation per year. And it was first for COVID. We've been lucky to have a few championship parades in the time that I've been here, which has been fantastic.
Yeah,
I always love activating for something fun rather than something depressing. But then we've been in the news for, a mass influx of migrants and asylum seekers, not really having any guidance from the feds or Congress, right? Like many jurisdictions were having these issues. That was a ridiculous activation, very, very long. Didn't really know what was going on. And then the other activation that we kind of went into that took a decent amount of time was our declared state of emergency on the homelessness crisis. And that, you've talked about it in your podcast and stuff, the evolution of the field. I joke that, so our Emergency Operations Center motto is to save the city, which I love. And then whenever you're in 8 months of a response to a novel humanitarian crisis, you start to say, I'm saving the city from systemic political and policy failures. Right? There's no such thing as like a natural disaster. It's all just political and policy failures to respond and recover from a crisis. And that's kind of been where we've been at in Denver. Luckily, we've been able to kind of move migrants as our migrants issue, as well as our House 1000, what we now call an all in Mile High, to a program and like a task force, which I think is fantastic, and is something that we definitely needed. But that's been the biggest kind of notes on our activations through the time that I've been here, for sure.
And talk about like the, 4 days a year on average to 100 days. That's nuts.
A lot.
I wrote a paper in my master's program at Georgetown. The problem set actually almost got kicked me out of school. Thankfully, the director agreed with me, but the professor did not. For sure. Right. But the problem set was you have a town of 110,000 people. You have a Category 5 hurricane coming into the town. It was like supposed to be like on the East Coast, let's say North Carolina somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And what do you do to deal with evacuations for people getting out of there? And I already done that in my undergrad. I went through like the like mass notifications, using community leaders, like all the things that everybody would normally do.
Yeah.
And I looked at that exercise, but in the exercise of 110,000 people, it noted that 10% of the population was homeless. And I was like, you have 11,000 homeless people in a town of 110,000 people. I was like, that's your real problem. And so I looked at different states and found that the state of Utah was excellent about trying to get rid of chronic homelessness. And they worked with private partners, public and private partnerships, to look at the cost of people going to jail, for temporary shelters, for all the stuff that they were already paying for. And they found that if they built permanent housing with social workers and like healthcare, that they could take out anybody who's chronic homelessness was considered 1 year or over. Mm-hmm. A matter of like 3 years, every case that was identified as chronic homelessness was eliminated from the state.
It's phenomenal.
They looked at it like mental health issue, and it saved them money. Got people an address, got people a bank account number. They even did like other community projects there. Like they would do like gardening projects, like really simple things. People like get like, some consistency and pride in, like, I don't know. Homelessness is incredibly sad to me, especially working homeless, but it is a mental health problem. And I think it is exuberant for cities to focus on that and figure out how to overcome those problems, for sure.
Yeah, that's phenomenal to hear about the state of Utah. Houston also went through its own journey in housing a whole bunch of their people who were experiencing homelessness. Our program, or the way that we kind of tackled it, was based off of some of that Houston model. But the biggest finding, even in studies, like I went to grad school in Boston, and my grad school was across the street from like 5-6 different homeless shelters, Boston Healthcare for the Homeless, Boston Medical Centers, large safety net hospital. So homelessness was a really big thing that our school really focused on. And that's where I learned, like, permanent supportive housing, it's housing first model. You got to make sure people can get access to their hierarchy of needs, because how else are they going to succeed, right? How can you get a job or worry about getting a job if you don't even know where you're going to sleep that night? And yeah, right. And so you solve one, you got to be able to support everything else. And I think it was a huge lift for sure. And I'm so proud of what we did here in Denver and what we're continuing to do to kind of solve these issues. But it's these novel approaches. It's really, that's what it takes. And it also takes really strong leadership that's able to make that executive decision, be like, I don't care. This is such a problem for our citizens and our civilians. We have to set everything aside and make sure that people have a place to sleep. That's it.
You knew. Yeah. Food, clothing, and friendship, things that are required. The, like I said, at the beginning of the show, I've been kind of on like a Colorado kick for a little while. Like there's a lot of good things that are coming out of Colorado, yourself included. We're trying to do things right. I was an economics major that really cared about what was happening overseas with different disasters. And I thought I was going to do the UN. And all of a sudden I found myself EM. How in the world does a human rights, somebody who's studying human rights get into emergency management operations in Denver.
Sure.
How did you get there?
Yeah. So it's a kind of a long journey. My undergrad degree was in public health. I thought I was going to go to medical school. Turns out I'm not great at sitting down for very long times and reading a whole bunch of books. But I took an environmental health class for my degree, and we got to tour a FEMA facility in Austin. And so coming from Houston, hurricanes and stuff, tornadoes, I grew up, responding as just a citizen. And then we went to the FEMA facility. I was like, wait a minute, you can get paid to respond to hurricanes? Amazing. And then that kind of just like went through the whole thing. I did some disaster recovery work through AmeriCorps, National Civilian Community Corps on the West Coast. That really sparked a drive in like that field work level of response and recovery that I love. Went to grad school. And then I got into this nonprofit called Epicare that did community-based low resource austere environment training, like CPR, stop the bleed, scene safety, and it's kind of like co-hosted between Boston and Haiti. And so a little bit of that international humanitarian side got me into healthcare emergency management, and I just fell in love. I was like, this is it. And my core belief, especially when it comes to like public health, is you just got to help people help themselves, right? We talk about in public health, like different behavioral models that you can use to change people's behavior, changing the society around them to make sure that they can be healthy and safe. How else do you do that besides providing them the tools and that agency to take care of themselves? And that core, I think, is like emergency management and public health at its finest.
Yeah, absolutely. Like the core of reality, the core of belief really matters. And you probably heard me talk about this ad nauseum on the show if you've been listening, but we need to get back to like not just doing the things and scope creep, but to figure out our why as an industry.
Exactly.
The why of our industry has definitely been diluted by the things that we think we need to get done. People hate hearing this, but not everything's a priority, and not everything's like life-saving, life-sustaining. Some things are just like, the thing I like to ask about myself is, if I don't do this thing, will anybody care in a year?
Okay.
And if the answer is no, then like, why did I do that thing? Right? Like in terms of the job. But if it's going to impact somebody's life, if I'm going to do something, then like, I want to make it matter, right? Like I want the work that matches that. Anyways, Anisha, I'm looking at the time here. We're getting kind of close to 30 minutes here. Tell me, if you're going to talk to the field, if you're going to share one piece of advice from somebody who just bounced around like I did, who was on a great spot, it looks like you're just crushing it in Denver, doing all good things. What is some advice that you would give to somebody in the field who's especially coming over from another sector and looking to get into EM?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a kind of a handful of things, I guess. It depends on where that person is in their career. Is right, like the emergency management is really just like event management on steroids. You just kind of make it scary. And I think being able to take a look at the hard skills that you have and market yourself to try to get into emergency management, I think that's a really big skill to develop. Is if you work in event operations or marketing communications, like you can take those skills and pivot them into emergency management. You just got to figure out how to phrase it. And I think on that one side, if someone's trying to get into the field, I think that's really important, just to understand how your skill sets can fit in that moment's notice. But then also if someone is in like middle management of their career, they don't really do field work anymore. It's been years after they've gotten out of the field. Maybe they're feeling a little bit burnt out. My number one suggestion would be like, go do a day of field work, right? Go work with the people that you are affecting by your policy decisions. Go, touch grass, right? Like go help rebuild a house. Go cut down some trees for disaster mitigation with Team Rubicon or something. Like get yourself back into that why of like, you are a humanitarian. We are humanitarians at our core. We just help people. We are here to save lives. We help people. Get back to those roots.
If Denver's ever stupid and doesn't want to work with you, I'll hire you in a millisecond. I'm serious. It sounds.
I'll take you up.
One of us. Seriously, Anisha, thank you so much for coming on and talking to me, sharing like your story. Obviously, we want to continue that. For everybody who's listening, hound her, because I really wanted her to go to Die Pop, and she's going to a wedding instead. How dare you put your friends and family first? But seriously, we want to keep the conversation going, and thanks for taking the time to come and chat with me today.
Yeah, absolutely. No, thanks for having me. Like I said, I've been a longtime listener of your podcast. I've seen it grow, and the type of guests that you guys have on, and those little nuggets of wisdom. Love it.
Well, you match the caliber for sure. And with that, I have to do the same. Wait, do you know how to do the ending? Because you've listened so many times. Because I do like basically the same thing every time. Do you know how to do the ending for this?
I'm terrible at being like.
Gosh, you heard me right now. How dare you not memorize?
I do know.
All right,
welcome back, though.
Can you do that real quick for me? Can you do?
Yeah. Welcome back to the podcast. My name's John. I'm your host, John Scardena.
I've got, maybe a year ago, one of my buddies made fun of me. I was like, I'm going to make sure I lead into that super hard.
Lead into it. I love it.
I am excited every week to talk to somebody. Like I legitimately, I want the world to be a little more positive, and I think it's okay to be excited every week talking to cool people. So thank you for that. Thanks for cracking me up. Okay, so if you got something out of this episode, if you're listening in, which you should have, because Anisha's awesome, you gotta give us that 5-star rating and subscribe. It's the fastest way. We know that you got something out of it. If you want to share a lesson learned that you heard from the field, or if you have another idea, you got to put it on social media. Let us know. And of course, if you have a question for Anisha that you want us to pass on to her, you can email us at contact@thereadinesslab.com. We'll pass it on. And with that, we'll see you for the next one. Peace.